compassionate public service can have on everyday people and local economies. Everyone who has worked with Bob respects him, and that goes for me, my staff, and all of the SBA employees that he has worked with over all of the years, and the thousands of small businesses who he has helped during those years. Bob Nelson is a small business champion, and because of him, countless business entrepreneurs and communities are strengthening our nation, creating jobs, and making our economy the envy of the world. So thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob, for everything that you have done, for bringing a public servant's heart to your work, and for your many years of service making the Massachusetts Small Business Administration District Office the best in the nation. So, Mr. President, over the last 2 months, the Trump administration has made one thing painfully clear. They do not have an all-of-the-above energy strategy. They have an oil-above-all energy strategy. Oil above the law, above the economy, above the health and wallets of working families in our nation. Gas prices are up. Electricity bills are up. Home heating costs are up. Yet, instead of investing in working families, Donald Trump is launching a full-scale assault on the very programs designed to bring costs down and create jobs, all while spewing baseless lies that begin in the White House and then spread across his entire administration, but especially focused on his energy policy. At the Department of Energy, staff have been ordered to draw up a hit list of clean energy programs Congress already funded, programs workers are counting on. These are not hypothetical investments. These are real dollars that could unleash real jobs and real benefits for communities across the country. And now they're being sacrificed to serve a political agenda that rewards polluters and punishes the public. Nowhere was this agenda more proudly displayed than at this week's Sarah Week, or as I like to call it, the Olympics of Oil, where Energy Secretary Chris Wright gave a speech that would make big oil blush, although it's more likely that they just turned with a flush because of the incredible way in which they were treated. Big oil had a big treat coming from the speech by Energy Secretary Chris Wright. So let's take a moment to fact-check Secretary of Energy Chris Wright's big oil-sponsored big lies at CERAWeek in Houston. Chris Wright said, quote, this is his quote, "The previous administration's policy was focused myopically on climate change, with people as simply collateral damage." False. Chris Wright is wrong. When Democrats controlled the White House and Congress, we invested in solutions that centered smart communities and a livable future. Since the Inflation Reduction Act was passed in 2022, the clean energy boom has created more than 400,000 new jobs and spurred $420 billion in investments, most of it in red districts. 70 to 80% of the funding is in red districts. That's a people-powered economy. That's an all-of-the-above strategy. Everyone is included. So if we're talking myopic, look no further than Trump. It is the pot calling the kettle black. Trump has been exclusively focused on tax breaks for the rich with extensive collateral damage. New reporting shows that more than 50,000 energy jobs have been lost or stalled since Trump was elected, and that over $56 billion in U.S. clean energy investments were canceled or stalled in that same time. If he continues down this road and guts the IRA, he will be driving an estimated 790,000 jobs off a cliff while wiping $160 billion from our economy by 2030 and raising household energy costs by $32 billion over the next decade. In other words, President Trump and his energy policy are engaging in economic sabotage. So let's continue fact-checking Secretary Wright. Secretary Wright also said in that speech, quote, "Wind and solar supply roughly 3% of global primary energy. The truth, renewables powered 30% of the world's electricity in 2023. Got it? Not 3%, 30% of the world's electricity in 2023. And in the first 9 months of 2024, 96% of all new electrical generation capacity installed in the United States was renewable. Wind, solar, battery. 96% of all new electrical generation capacity installed, with the majority actually coming from solar. It's the fastest growing, cheapest energy out there. Big oil isn't just losing its monopoly, it simply cannot compete. The natural gas industry, they're petrified. Can you imagine if you're saying, well, we're the only way in the future in which you can have predictable electricity which is generated, natural gas is the answer, when in 2024, 96% of all new electrical generating capacity was wind and solar and battery storage technology? If you do that for 10 years in a row, the natural gas industry is facing an existential moment. That's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of competition. They're afraid of alternative energy sources. Oil, gas, and coal, they got a tax break for 100 years from the federal government, and they were able to squash all of the competition over all of those years. But when finally we level the playing field and the alternatives show up that are non-polluting, that don't have any greenhouse gases that go up into the planet, that don't warm the planet, all of a sudden, we're hearing the Secretary of Energy in the Trump administration lying about that because they have to lie. Otherwise, they would have to explain why they're planning on killing hundreds of thousands of new jobs in these industries which are absolutely bursting at the seams. But wait, there's more. Here's what else Secretary Wright said at the CERA conference down in Texas. He said, the last administration recklessly pursued policies that were certain to drive up electricity prices. Once again, false. False. The fact, however, is that onshore wind is the cheapest source of new electricity in America. It has been for nearly a decade. It beats fossil fuels even without subsidies and costs half as much as new natural gas on average. Again, existential threat to the natural gas industry. Onshore wind beats it in the marketplace every day for 10 years in a row. So what's Secretary Wright saying? He's saying he's going to lead the effort to kill it and to kill solar, to kill all of it. And building new solar, well, it's cheaper than running existing coal or building new gas projects in the United States. Solar's winning in the marketplace, and it's frightening to the natural gas industry, just absolutely frightening. It's fossil fuel volatility that has hammered families at the pump and on their power bills with fossil fueled exports going to the highest bidder abroad. Now, in my home state of Massachusetts, many gas bills are double what they were last year. That's unacceptable. Let's keep going with the fact checks. In a pathetic attempt to justify the benefits of deadly pollution, Secretary of Energy Wright said, quote, "We've raised atmospheric CO2 by 50% in the process of doubling human life expectancy." Then he said, quote, "Everything in life involves trade-offs." Well, let me be clear. In the United States, climate-fueled disasters already kill more than 1,300 people every year. More CO2 doesn't mean more life. It means more floods, more fires, suffering, deaths, $300 billion worth of damage between Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton last fall. $150 billion worth of damage in Los Angeles from climate-driven storms. And by the way, only $50 billion of it covered by insurance. Catastrophic for all those communities. So let's talk about the real trade-offs. Clean air traded for asthma. Safe homes traded for billion-dollar climate disasters. Lower bills traded for big oil windfall profits. This administration has made its trade-off clear: your future for their profit. That's Trump's art of the deal. And what a great deal for the oil, gas, and coal industry. All they have to do is just raise money for Donald Trump. And in return, they kill the competitors which are killing the oil, gas, and coal industry in the market. Adam Smith is spinning in his grave so fast that he would actually qualify for a tax break under the IRA. That's how much they're lying about the marketplace and how it is responding to, finally, the incentives that are there to compete against oil, gas, and coal. Which brings us to the Environmental Protection Agency. Because what's a fossil fueled agenda without a full-on assault on the very agency tasked with protecting our air and our water and our climate? 2 weeks ago, EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin announced that he is taking more than 30 actions to unravel our bedrock environmental safeguards in a nauseating attempt to shock and awe us into submission. These are the regulations that keep our air breathable, our water drinkable. These are the standards that keep us healthy instead of sick, and all so that the big oil BFFs can make a few more big bucks, while the rest of us will foot the bill with our health conditions that will be created by these fossil fuels, these pollutants going up into the atmosphere. These rollbacks are not a revolution for American progress in energy. They are a return to the same tired fossil fuel program of the past. For starters, they are attempting to eliminate EPA's authority to regulate dangerous greenhouse gases based on the threat they pose to public health or welfare, known as the endangerment finding. This finding came from a Supreme Court ruling in my very own home state that brought the case to the Supreme Court, Massachusetts versus EPA in 2007, which said something we all know: greenhouse gases pose an actual and imminent threat to people everywhere. And it doesn't stop there. They're hoping to roll back quality standards for particulate matter pollution that are projected to avoid 4,500 premature deaths and 800,000 cases of asthma over just 6 years. That's all going to get wiped out if they have their way. But we're going to fight them, by the way. We're going to fight them every single step of the way on this dangerous, health endangering strategy, which they are seeking to put on the books. They're aiming to gut wastewater regulations so coal plants can contaminate the water we drink from and swim in. They're trying to pump the brakes on clean car and truck regulations that reduce harmful air pollutants and save families money at the pump. The list goes on and on. They are dismantling the federal government before our very eyes. This isn't about efficiency. This is about sacrificing the health of our communities for the health of their pocketbooks. But just like Energy Secretary Chris Wright's speech, we know it's a lie. They aren't making America great again. They're selling America to the highest bidder, to the oil and gas and coal industry. That's what they're doing. They're just selling us out. We must continue to speak up for the truth and continue to fight. The natural gas industry, they're threatened by a wind and solar and battery revolution that will generate the electricity which we need in our country. Natural gas doesn't like it. They want it killed. The oil industry, we put 70% of all the oil we consume into gasoline tanks. They don't want to see the all-electric vehicle revolution continue to grow exponentially. They've got to try to kill that too, so that we do not have that reduction in the amount of oil that we put into cars that we drive around our country that spew that pollution up into the sky. So the oil and gas industry, they go to the White House, they go to Donald Trump, they go to Mar-a-Lago in order to get the protection they need against competition, the protection they need against clean energy, the protection that they need against the creation of 1 million new clean energy jobs in our country. That should be our future, and it's what young people want more than anything else. They want that revolution. They're the Green New Deal revolution. That's what they want. They want to see it happen. And because it is happening, oil and gas are having, unfortunately, this White House, Secretary of Energy, Christopher Wright, his entire cabinet, the EPA Administrator, Lee Zeldin, all of them just dismantle all of the protections which have been put on the books over a generation. This is an historic moment. And all we can say to you, oil, gas, and coal, all we can say to you, Trump White House, is we're going to fight. We're not going away. There's a young generation out there that's rising up, and they're not happy with what is happening in this White House. They do not want to see their future sold for campaign contributions from polluters in our country. So we're ready to fight, and we're going to align ourselves with the young people in our country that want a different future, a better future, a clean future. And that's what we're going to get, because we will not lose. And I can't thank Senator Whitehouse enough for being our leader on the Environment and Public Works Committee and for bringing us out here this evening to have this incredibly important, historic discussion about the direction of our nation. Thank you.
The distinguished senator from Massachusetts yield for a question.
I would love to have a conversation with the senator from Rhode Island.
Well, you referenced the value to the fossil fuel industry of being able to run to Congress or run to the White House and throw money around, and as a result of that expenditure on politicians, earn the right to pollute for free and get enormous competitive advantage against clean energy. The industry clearly spends a lot of money. We know they spent $100 million getting Trump elected. He asked them for $1 billion, which could have come through dark money, in order to deliver on this subsidy program they want. How lucrative do you think the fossil fuel political operation is?
I think it's the most well-financed lobbying effort in Washington, D.C. I think they have had an ownership of this building for 100 years, and they're afraid it's about to slip away. Would the gentleman from Rhode Island agree with me?
I would not be surprised, actually, if the political lobbying and dark money influence operation of the fossil fuel industry was not actually its most lucrative line of business. Because for $1 billion or $6 billion or $7 billion spent manipulating our politics, They protect a $700 billion annual subsidy, according to the International Monetary Fund. That's a $100 return every year for every $1 invested. They don't make that much off their tar sands. They don't make that much off their oil wells. They don't make that much off their methane leaks.
You know, the senator from Rhode Island is wise and precise in his analysis of the agenda of these companies. So the senator from Rhode Island and I have for 12 years led the effort, along with the senator from Connecticut, to have offshore wind all along the Atlantic coast. And the Biden administration put in place a plan to deploy 30,000 megawatts of offshore wind. And what Donald Trump, with Chris Wright, the Secretary of Energy, with the Secretary of Interior, are now planning is to kill that entire revolution, capturing the wind that blew the pilgrims to our shores, capturing the wind that had the whaling crews go out in order to fuel the energy of the 19th century. But when it wants to be used for the energy of the 21st century, the oil and gas and coal industry say, absolutely not. We can't allow that to happen. And why can't they allow it to happen? Because it will replace natural gas-generated electricity that pollutes. And it would just transform the way in which electricity powers our businesses, powers our homes all across the East Coast of the United States. And we could wave goodbye to that natural gas, fossil-fueled, polluting future for the 21st century. So what is Donald Trump doing? After receiving tens and tens of millions of dollars in contribution from the natural gas industry, led by Harold Hamm, who promised Trump, the #1 natural gas guy in America, that he would raise the money for him in the campaign. Well, the payoff, the payback, is kill offshore wind. So they say all of the above. Nah, they don't mean all of the above. Chris Wright, the Secretary of Energy, says, people really don't like wind, so we have to make an exception because people don't like wind. You know who doesn't like wind? The natural gas industry. They hate wind, okay? They hate it because it's the competition, because it's working, because it's cheaper, and because it's also cleaner. In the same way that the oil industry hates the all-electric vehicle revolution because it kills oil as a business, as we move to a renewable way of generating electricity that then powers the vehicles which we drive in America. So the gentleman, the chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee, as usual, has just put his finger right on the problem. And it is the money that is sloshing through the Mar-a-Lago and Washington, D.C. White Houses is an absolute disgrace. And I can't thank him enough for bringing this out to the floor for a full exposition for the American
people. And we
people.
welcome our colleague from Connecticut to join the festivities here on the Senate floor. All 3 states, downwind states from the pollution of the Midwest, of Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio. Nothing we can do about it other than breathe in the waste that they don't clean up.
What does that mean?
Senator Blumenthal.
What does that mean by downwind, just so people can understand it? What do you mean by that?
Well, it means that the prevailing winds that blow over West Virginia, that blow over Pennsylvania, that blow over Ohio, blow over their smokestacks that have been deliberately built high into the air so that the pollution coming out of the smokestack gets caught up in those prevailing winds and ends up falling down in the form of ozone and particulate matter in Massachusetts, in Connecticut, and in Rhode Island. And the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management and the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Quality and the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection can do nothing about it because those states have chosen to put it up into the sky above them so that it lands on us.
And it blows into the lungs of the people in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. I yield to the gentleman from Connecticut.
Yep. The perfect segue to my remarks, if I may be recognized, Mr. President.
Connecticut.
Thank you, Mr. President. The perfect segue to my remarks because downwind means we are the recipient of